Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel. For this video we will be doing the review for the Hunger Games prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. And yes, do not worry, I will do reviews for the other Hunger Games books. I just wanted to get the prequel out of the way first because I just finished it last week and I wanted to get this done when it's still fresh in my head. Be on the lookout for when I do reviews for Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay. Format, as always, for the book review: summary of the story, pros, cons, and then my final thought and rating of the book. With all that out of the way, let's get started. So, like I said in the intro, this book is a prequel to The Hunger Games, which is set 60-ish years before the events of the original Hunger Games book, and we follow Coriolanus Snow, also known as President Snow in the original Hunger Games books. The story of this book takes place 10 years after the end of the District Rebellion. The Hunger Games have been going on for 10 years, but they really aren't as popular as the Capitol wants them to be, so they bring in 24 students from the Capitol's schools, Coriolanus Snow being among them, and they pair them with that year's 24 tributes. This is basically an experiment to see if the kids can find a way to make the Hunger Games more appealing to the districts and to make everyone understand why they have the Hunger Games every year. Coriolanus gets paired up with the girl tribute from District 12, Lucy Gray, and it's up to him to try and figure out how to keep her alive and how to win the games for this year. But his ambition to win causes him several friendships, and several key actions he takes cost him a lot of friends, and we start to see the rise of President Snow and the man Coriolanus will become starting within this book. First thing we're going to talk about is actually getting to see the original Hunger Games in this book. One of the really cool things that we get to actually see in this book is the first real iteration of the Hunger Games, because this book takes place 60 years before the games that we know. These games look a lot different. Instead of that giant environmental arena that the original books takes place in, the games in this book are all held in just basically one giant coliseum, and it's a lot less orchestrated, it's a lot less theatrical, but kind of in a way it's more brutal, because while you're going through the book, you realize that not everyone in Panem is watching these games. It's really only the people in the Capitol who are even watching this, and you realize that the kids in the games are dying basically for only the Capitol, and the districts aren't seeing any of it. But I really kind of found it interesting to see the contrast between the original games and the modern games of the original books. I think it's really cool to start to see the modern games take shape in this book, and it was really fun to go back in time and see how the games were originally played before they became the giant blood sport spectacular we see in the original books. That brings me into my second point I really want to talk about, and that is seeing the formation of the modern games in this book. Throughout the book, one of the characters, Dr. Gall, is pushing the mentor kids to figure out a way to make the Hunger Games more accessible and more entertaining, and they actually come up with two ideas. The first one is the betting idea, where people at the Capitol can bet on who they think is going to win the games, and the second idea is having the general public being able to sending supplies for the tributes, because now that those systems are in place, the idea of those systems being that if we get the general public involved in the games and let them think they have a stake in deciding who's going to win, they'll be more invested in that. And that's very much the formation of the modern games, because now the modern games in the original books were basically giant betting events on who the last surviving kid is going to be. And instead of the neglected games that we start out with, Dr. Gall tells them to try and fix, now we're starting to see the escalation of Capitol's bloodlust for the game. Now that they can actually affect who's going to win, they're so into it, and we get to see the formation of the modern games for the original books. And I think Suzanne Collins did a really good job at showing us the progression of where the games started originally and showing the start of the process of where they will end up with the original books. Third point is going to be all the connections Suzanne Collins was able to throw into this book, connecting it to the originals. Throughout the book, there are actually a bunch of connections to the original books, and these mainly take the form of characters, because there are several characters with last names that we know. We see someone named Lucky Flickerman, obviously the presumed ancestor of Caesar Flickerman, and there are also several other characters with last names that we recognize, and you kind of get the idea that their descendants will become very important, but it's cool to see where characters that we know start out, like where their families started out, and it's kind of cool that Suzanne Collins put those connections into the book with characters that we will meet in the future. We get to see their predecessors. Another form these connections takes is also the songs. So when Snow goes to District 12, Lucy Gray sings several songs that we actually know from the original books. She sings like the Hanging Song, the Meadow Song. It's really cool to see those connections because Suzanne Collins uses those connections very well. They're not just there to connect to the original books, but they serve a really big purpose because a lot of the songs Lucy Gray sings are really relevant to the plot, and even Coriolanus' character development is connected to some of those songs. It was really good that she was able to use something that we know so well from the original books in a cool way and not make it super obvious and in your face. These connections, they are definitely there, but they serve a really big purpose for the story overall, and they're not just there to be like, oh, hey, I remember that from the original books. They actually serve a purpose, and those are the best ways to use callbacks to any sort of original series, and not just beat the reader's head with connections to the books. They have to really serve a purpose, and I think Suzanne Collins did a really good job at making those connections serve a really important purpose. One thing I want to focus on for the con section real quick is the fact that we know where Snow's story ends, and that kind of affects the book a little bit. So what I mean by that is there's kind of always a problem with prequels, especially prequels about people that we already know how their story ends. Think of prequels with Darth Vader. We all know where Anakin was gonna end with those. This book kind of suffers from the same thing because we know that Snow has to rise to power. Despite what I'm talking about, this book is really good. I think Suzanne Collins did a really good job at letting us see the man that Snow will become, but letting us see a different side of him that we never got to see because we all knew the ruthless man that he was during the original books, but it was cool to see in this book at least his sort of more humane side. And by the end of the book, we actually full on see the crazy dictator that this guy will become. This book slightly suffers from the prequel problem because we know where Snow's story ends. There are several like really tense events that are still really good to read, but I think Suzanne Collins does a really good job at showing how these events affect Snow, but it's kind of like, okay, we can see how these will shape him into the man he will become, but there is kind of a, I won't say lack of tension, but there is tension, but you're assured that Snow is going to make it out of it because he has to get to the original Hunger Games books. Despite what I talked about, I think this book does a really good job showing us a different side of Snow that we didn't get to see in the original books, but also setting up the man that Snow will become for the original books. I really did enjoy this book, but there is a slight problem that comes with every prequel, and that is kind of lack of tension because we know where their story is going to end. But other than that, this book is really, really good. Final thoughts on A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Overall, I think Suzanne Collins did an awesome job writing this prequel because she did a really good job at giving us a Pan Am that we haven't seen, with the games looking completely different and no one really being super invested in the games, but also having us see where Pan Am will be in 60 years with Coriolanus and his classmates bringing up the idea of instituting the betting and sending items to the tribute. This book does a really good job at giving us a glimpse of how Pan Am changed over 60 years because of what Snow does in this book. Also, it gives us a really good look at where Snow started, and it kind of recontextualizes how he acts during the original series, because I feel like when I go through the original Hunger Games books after reading this, I'll have a different perspective on what Snow does after knowing his backstory. I really think this book is awesome. If you guys read the Hunger Games and haven't checked this out, definitely check it out. It'll definitely recontextualize Snow's actions in the Hunger Games, and I really honestly did enjoy this. I'm going to be giving Suzanne Collins's A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes a 9 out of 10. You know the drill. If you have read the book before or have read the Hunger Games series, in the comments, feel free to discuss, but please do not spoil anything. If anyone wants to read this book themselves, just please do not spoil the book. I want anyone who hasn't read it to go in spoiler free. Other than that, go crazy and discuss the book. If you guys have books you want me to do reviews on in the future, you can drop recommendations down in the comments. If you guys want to follow me on social media, my Instagram is Riley Murray Book Reviews, my Facebook is Riley Murray Book Reviews, my Twitter is Riley T. Murray, my Discord is Riley Murray Book Reviews, and my TikTok that I set up is RM Book Reviews. I will have links to everything down in the description if you guys want to go and follow them. So, if you guys enjoyed this video, please do not forget, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss a video. That is going to be it for this video. Till next video, I will see you guys. Have a great weekend.